Hello everyone, Jared here, and in today's video, we're leaving Chongqing and heading to Kunming. And this is going to be our longest train ride yet, although it isn't necessarily the longest route. However, this is a map of pretty much the rough area we've traveled in China so far. So to begin, we went to the train station and went to go have breakfast at the only place that was open, McDonald's.
Do you want to explain why with a McDonald's meal, they're giving you glass cups as souvenirs before boarding a train? Most people are just leaving them on the table, so there you go.
Then after that, we walked to the convenience store, got us some food, and went into the train, where we waited for it to pull away. And off we went. Alright, we are on the train heading from Chongqing to Kunming. This is going to be a long train today. Luckily for us, the seats were going to be a little comfortable and spacious because we needed all that room for this 5-hour train ride. And the reason that this train ride was going so slowly was because we had to go through a whole lot of mountains. As we were moving along, I would constantly be checking our progress on my phone, which was draining my battery actually rather quickly. But luckily I had a charger that I brought with me. As we continued our way down south, the landscape began to change, and the mountains slowly gave way to the iconic karst formations that China's southern provinces are well known for. And after around the first couple hours, it was time for us to eat. So what was it that we were eating, you might ask? It was blueberry jelly-filled bread, and it came with some type of cream. Not cream cheese, not cheese, some kind of cream. It wasn't the best, but it was better than nothing. And while we were eating, we could enjoy looking out at the scenery, because I have to say, of all the different train rides that I'd done so far on the trip, heading south towards Kunming was definitely where the best scenery was, particularly going through Guiyang. But one issue that would constantly arise was we'd be going in and out of tunnels, just like you're seeing here. And this would be constant throughout the trip, particularly as we got closer to Kunming, as we were going through Guizhou Province. One thing that I should tell all of you about going on a train in China, at least in southern China, is if you're going to be trying to get videos of the scenery, pictures of the scenery, one problem you're going to have a lot of is going through tunnels. You're in and out and in and out, and every time you think you have enough time to take a shot, you go right back into the next one. See, we're out. And let's see how long we are out. Oh, there we go, we're back in a tunnel again. As you can see, you have no idea how long it'll be until you're back into another tunnel. But the short glances that you get when you're able to look out at the hills is absolutely worth it.
So which is more impressive, the Great Wall of China or the Great Tunnel of China?
Hard to say.
You mean the question leaves you in the dark?
Well, that's the kind of jokes that I was getting throughout the trip. Fortunately for all of you, I didn't put that many in. At one point, there was a really long tunnel, and once we came out of it, all of a sudden we were up high above most of the mountains, and we were able to see this wonderful view that you see right now. This was probably my favorite view from all the different train rides around China, and I got to see it again on another train ride on the way back down later. Anyways, we began to pull into Yunnan Province from the north, and as we got closer to Kunming, one thing that we noticed was there was a lot more farmland, and particularly a lot of greenhouse-like coverings over a wide swath of land. But it wasn't too long before it was finally time for us to slow down and pull on into Kunming's South Railway Station, which is quite a ways outside the city. So we arrived at the station and then got in a taxi, which would take us for the next 45 minutes north back into the city proper, where our hotel was located. In a taxi heading towards our hotel now in Kunming. The weather is so much nicer here. Went down about 15 degrees, so we're at about 70 now. It's much more manageable with the humidity than in Chongqing. I'm somebody who really likes the cold, so being able to be rid of that humidity for a few days was wonderful. As we pulled closer into the city, we were passing by many landmarks, such as the museums that you see in these two clips, as well as some streets that I hadn't seen that were clearly touristy, but never appeared in any tour guides that I'd looked up on the city before. But we eventually got to our hotel and were greeted with this view of construction right outside our window. And it could get a little noisy sometimes too. But rather than stay inside our room, we immediately went back outside to see what was around, as was standard practice by now. And there was a bunch of construction going on. In fact, I'd have to say that of every city we went on our trip in China, Kunming was certainly undergoing the most construction out of all of them. It seemed like every single street was being dug up and replaced, and buildings were coming down everywhere. And like the rest of China, bikes were being abandoned, including rented bikes, in favor of mopeds and motorcycles like what you see here. These are what most people in China will use for transportation nowadays, instead of bicycles. Although, there are still a few people who will prefer to use bikes. But truly, the age of the bicycle is dead in China. Anyways, after all that, we went closer to a mall where we found some interestingly named stores, such as Man Cat Coffee, Me Too Drink, and probably my favorite place of all, Herun Dental, or if you didn't know the pinyin, Herun Dental. And who wouldn't also want to get this frog fish head hot pot that is apparently also sold right nearby? So on our way back to the hotel, we came across a really intricately designed building that, to this day, I still have no idea what its purpose was, because pretty much everything that's there was closed along its length. But the designs are very reminiscent of what you would find in Qing architecture, and for all I know, it could have been new, based off of how fresh the paint was looking. After that, we went back to the hotel and had ourselves dinner as well as desserts before going back to our room for the night. Then, on the morning of our first real day in Kunming, I decided that I would stay in the hotel room because I wanted to catch up on sleep. So instead, my father walked out around the city, and the first thing he came across was this church, which unfortunately was being torn down. And right next to it was a big green wall that had all of these pictures and information that talked about the general history of the area, as well as old sites around Old Kunming. Unfortunately, there wasn't very much information at all to be had about this old church that was being torn down. So, if anyone knows more, I'd appreciate it if you let me know. However, after that, my father walked on by a marketplace that happened to still be running for the day. It was a little crowded, but there was a lot to see. There was a lot of it that was filmed too, but a lot of it was also cut out. So maybe one day I'll put up the unabridged version of what was here, so you can just see the entire walkthrough. But as you can see, there are lots of different things from fruits, vegetables, starches, many of which are even handmade like these noodles, and then protein sources such as eggs of all different colors, and fish, which had something funny happen right here, where the girl gets splashed by the fish's tail. That was probably my favorite clip from the market. But for my father, his favorite moment was coming right up, right after this meat rack that you see here. It was this, a donkey tail. Now, I have no idea why this is left out on the counter, but I can't imagine it's something that would attract a lot of customers. So anyways, after walking through a little bit more, my father decided he'd turn back and head his way on out. And eventually he found his way to the main road, where he walked back along a different path toward the hotel. And this path happened to bring him right next to a park, where there happens to be one of the canals that goes through the city. Kunming is a very pretty city, and it always looks like it's spring there, so that's how it got its name, or nickname rather, which is the City of Spring. The weather is almost always nice around any time of year. Although right now, it is again rather noisy because once you leave this area and head back to these main roads, then all the construction going on can get to be a little much for someone like me. And so, after my father came back to the hotel, we decided that we'd head on out again. Or rather, that I'd head out for the first time today, and we decided to walk back over in the direction of Old Kunming, where there was supposed to be not only a park, but some historic buildings as well. One of the things that struck me right away, though, walking around Kunming, is that, in general, the city feels a lot more peaceful, calm, and not as hectic as most other cities in China. There's still lots of buildings that have some historical value, but unlike where they would be otherwise crowded in most other cities, the historic landmarks are not as busy here. There was one thing in the park, though, that was particularly odd. This was probably the first time I'd ever heard Bollywood while I was in China, and I have to say I was not expecting to hear it here of all places. But moving on from there, we walked over toward yet another mall, which was on our way to the old city streets, and we came across, yet again, more businesses that had some interesting English, such as this one, Absolute You Hot, as well as this, Durian is a Child. I don't think that that's particularly how I would translate a lot of these businesses' names, but that's what they ended up going for. Anyways, we walked on down through an underground mall, which was named Wangfujing, and came across this place called Monkey Home that sold some very interesting glasses, before moving on yet again, and we eventually found our way over to the Old Street, in the center of Kunming. And this was where the old historical and cultural street of Kunming began.
We've just arrived at Kunming Old Street, which is supposedly the old street in the middle of Kunming City. Whether or not it's actually old, I don't really know. I just saw people doing a lot of uptake on the place, at least on the streets outside of it. You can still hear it in the background, probably. Let's check it out.
Supposedly, the 6 streets and 15 alleys that comprise this area date back to as old as the Ming and Qing dynasties, which means from 1400 onwards. And supposedly they started to conserve this area around 2004. But as you move your way around this street area, a lot of the buildings actually really look new. Although they have an older architectural style, you can really see the contrast from a building on one side to the next. And this becomes particularly more evident later on, as we continued our walk through here. One cool thing of note, though, is that this man right here, Liji Guzhuang, was supposedly the man who created pu'er tea. But aside from that little factoid, I was a little disappointed with this area, sadly, because look at the juxtaposition of these 2 buildings next to each other, one being old and the other being new. You can really tell the difference, and the same goes for up at the roofs as well. And what we noticed was a lot of these buildings, again, were being torn down, and the new ones were being brought up. So it's hard to know, again, whether they're really conserving a lot of these, or they're just knocking all the old ones down and replacing them all together with knockoffs. Once we made our way through this walking street area, we found ourselves over at a park. That, unfortunately, was also closed. But it really felt like we'd suddenly been transported to a different place in the world, because the architectural style right outside the old town was rather stark compared to where we just were. And as we made our way down the road by the park, we came across a rather interesting poster. And rather than explain anything about it, I'll let you make up your own mind about what it's talking about. And after that, we found ourselves out of the entire Old Town area and back into the main city proper. So we decided it was time for us to walk on back towards our hotel along the waterways where my father had walked earlier in the day, and I got to see this nice view for myself. And if you come to Kunming, well, it might just be worth it for you to also walk along one of the canals, because you will find a lot of flowers and beauty at every single place, and you may come across some surprises as well. Just like the English translations that I found here. This one, out of all of them today, has to be my absolute favorite. Although I'd never want to have it because it's durian. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video of our first somewhat relaxing day spent here in Kunming. And next time, we're heading off to what might be the best part of our trip in China, the Yunnan Nationalities Village, where we get to learn about a whole variety of ethnic minorities in China's Yunnan Province. So, hope to see you next time. Thank you again for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Also, please share this channel with others so we can make the channel grow together as I continue to put out more videos.